America has woken up to the aftermath and what is being seen as the biggest inflection point in U.S. political history in recent times. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has survived an assassination bid during a rally in Pennsylvania. A bullet grazed past Trump's right ear while he was on stage. Within moments, U.S. Secret Service agents whisked him off the stage and away from the rally venue. Donald Trump is safe, and on his social media page, Truth Social has written that now more than ever, America needs to stand united. US President Joe Biden, meanwhile, has called it a sick assassination attempt. Right, so this is, of course, a background of what we saw taking place. For the latest, let me go across to Nick Harper. In fact, let me also introduce my other guests who are going to join us today. There will be Glenn Carl, a former CIA and former Deputy National Intelligence Officer, who is going to join us on the show, and also Seema Sirohi, columnist and author of a book on India-US relations. She is also going to join us on the show. But first, as I mentioned, let's start with Nick Harper, who's getting us all the latest from on ground there. Nikki, you are joining us from Washington, D.C. What exactly are we hearing in terms of, we've already seen a statement coming in from the U.S. president, but what is the political buzz like this morning as America wakes up to what is clearly now seen as the most defining point now in the U.S. presidential campaign?
I wanted to just draw your attention, first of all, to another statement that's come out in the last hour, this one from Melania Trump, the wife of Donald Trump, in which she calls the gunman a monster, saying that the gunman saw her husband, Donald Trump, as an inhuman political machine. And she urges in this statement Americans to ascend above the hate, the vitriol, and the single-minded ideas that ignite violence. And that really is the sentiment that is coming out this morning here in Washington from both sides of the political aisle. We've got Democrats and Republicans appearing on many of the talk shows this Sunday morning, all of them urging calm, all of them urging unity, and urging a way to try and turn down the temperature on the political divisions that the United States has been dealing with for many years. It's unclear if that will be possible in the coming days and the coming weeks, but at this stage, Republicans and Democrats saying it's time to try and find a way to put that violent political rhetoric to one side and try and find a way to unite.
Right. Any further details coming in on the shooter or the motive behind the entire incident? As we know, these are, of course, early days in the investigation, but any further details that we've got in terms of what could have been the reason behind this attack?
Yeah, still unclear what that motive is. We know that this 20-year-old gunman lived locally. He lived about an hour away from where the shooting took place. He lived in Pennsylvania, was a registered Republican voter, according to electoral rolls, but it looks as if he gave money to other political causes in the past. The FBI, as part of their investigation, are now scouring his digital footprint to see if he gave any suggestions or red flags online ahead of this shooting. Also being reported by various US media outlets in the last 30 minutes or so from unnamed sources within the security services saying that they have found explosive materials potentially both in his car and at his residence as well. That has not yet been confirmed by police. We are expecting some sort of press conference later on today. But there is perhaps the suggestion, if that is true, that he was looking at something wider than just the attempted assassination of the president, that he had other things stockpiled for other contingency plans.
Right. Nick, I want to ask you this news flash that we are reporting at the moment right now, that the Pentagon has commented on this incident, and they have just confirmed that the gunman, Thomas Crooks, did not have any military ties. If I can just read out that statement from Pentagon, they've said that, and I quote, "We have confirmed with each of the military service branches that there is no military service affiliation for the suspect with that name or date of birth in any branch, active or reserve component in their respective databases," unquote. The fact that the gunman, Thomas Crooks, was in fact carrying an assault rifle, which, is clearly a military level rifle, is what we are being told. This is the reason why probably the Pentagon has come out with this statement.
That's right. I mean, they also would want to look into this for really any shooting of this kind, but in particular one that is so high profile, to see if there were any military links, to see if there was any military training in the past. That Pentagon statement ruling out both of those things. But I guess it's still a question as to why and how he was able to obtain what we're being told was an AR-15 assault rifle that he used in this shooting. Some suggestions that it wasn't his, that instead it was owned by his father and bought quite recently in the last 6 months or so. That is another detail that is yet to be confirmed, but we're also hearing that they were able to identify the gunman, who didn't have identification on him. He didn't have a driver's license or a wallet with him that would have suggested his identity. They were able to work out his identity from the gun that he used in this attack.
And last question before we let you go, you know, the law enforcement agencies as well as the Secret Service there. Of course, the Secret Service saved, his life in a way. They whisked him off that stage quickly within moments after realizing what had just happened. But, you know, there are several questions being raised about the security lapse there as well. We did not see any representative from Secret Service in that FBI press conference. So any word on what exactly is being is there any assessment of the lapse that took place over there, quote unquote?
Well, the suggestions from the Republican side, and by this I'm speaking about the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, the suggestion very much is that the ball was dropped by the Secret Service, that they got this spectacularly wrong, that they had security lapses that were able to lead to this attempted assassination. And those are the type of questions that Republicans in particular want to get to the bottom of. They're going to be calling the head of the Secret Service to a special committee meeting on July the 22nd to ask her questions about those potential security lapses. But it is really the main focus of that investigation of how this was able to take place.
I appreciate you joining us with all the latest on this big story that we have been tracking right from the morning, of course, and we'll keep coming back for more details as they emerge. Thank you so much for joining us with that. I'm also joined, as I mentioned, by Glenn Carl, former CIA officer and former Deputy National Intelligence Officer, and Seema Sirohi, columnist and author of a book on India-US relations. Thank you to both for joining us on the show. Seema, I want to talk to you about the aftermath of this entire incident and the fact that it's happening just months away from the US presidential elections. For you right now, what is the biggest concern that you have in terms of what this could mean going ahead in a presidential election, which has already been very torrid and volatile?
See, the main issue is the political rhetoric has been quite extreme from both sides. It's the attack, the attempted assassination shouldn't come as a surprise, really, because both sides have accused and demonized each other for months. The Democrats have called Trump, compared him to Hitler. And the Republicans have demonized Biden and the Democratic campaign, accused them of allowing all sorts of criminals, into the US through an open border. So the rhetoric has gone on for months. When the Supreme Court ruled recently giving Trump a certain amount of immunity, the left-wing anchors said that it was a death squad judgment. Why? Because presidential actions were made immune from prosecution. So they, both sides have gone to such an extreme that violence was always implicit in this campaign. And now it is explicit. So how it affects the actual process of elections and, whether Trump will gain a sympathetic vote or what is not yet clear. Those who are going to vote for Trump will definitely now come out and vote.
Right. So Right, Seema, so you see a need for both the Republican and the Democrat side to actually come out and calm the tension in a way, because we've already seen a lot of Republicans, for that matter, actually raising that particular statement that, according to them, Joe Biden made, which, according to these few Republicans, actually triggered such an attack. So do you see that there's an urgent need now for top political leaders in the US to make sure that the tensions don't flare up and that both sides actually stand down in the kind of, as you are saying, statements which have been made in this political campaign so far?
Absolutely. I mean, that goes without saying. And both sides are doing that in public. Ever since the attempt, both the Democrats and Republicans have kind of said, it's time to come together, unite, and Melania Trump's statement is especially important in that context. But at the same time, Republicans are blaming the Democrats and the left-wing rhetoric for this attempted assassination. So while on the one hand, they're calling for unity and calming of tempers, on the other hand, they are not stopping from doing the blame game. So we shall see how it plays out. Right now, I'm not very optimistic that this is, both sides are going to try to exploit the situation.
Right. Let me also bring in Glenn Carl now. Glenn, there's, of course, been a lot of spotlight on what went wrong. How was it that a person with an assault rifle on a rooftop just around 450 feet away from that stage was allowed? So in terms of your experience, could you tell us what exactly is the kind of protocol that is followed by Secret Service agents, by intelligence agents and law enforcement agencies in the US in sanitizing a rally area where such a high-profile person as a former US president is addressing?
Well, the general description of the approach taken is to imagine an onion. Think of an onion with all of its layers and different levels of skin. And so the Secret Service, which has the lead in protecting the most senior officials, will create different layers of security. So you have to go through one checkpoint, then you have to go through another checkpoint. You take lines of sight. In my personal experience, when the president or a vice president or a presidential candidate is going to appear somewhere, I know that the Secret Service people in advance I've seen them do it, will go to literally every room and every window with a line of sight and the roofs on the venue or the area, the path that the individual is going to take. In this instance, the shooter seems to have been about 150 meters away. And I read one eyewitness who said that he thought that the line of sight of the Secret Service snipers and observers who were on rooftops, and there you can see them, didn't have a line of sight to where the man was. That would seem to be two things. One, an almost impossible thing to stop, given at some point the onion skins have to stop. You can't infinitely go out to every conceivable place to all points on the horizon 360 degrees around. And at the same time, obviously, I think heads are going to roll for this because it was a gap in the coverage and seems to have been an oversight. But it's layers, onion layers, that is the approach.
Right. Glenn, important points that you have raised, and I'll come back to you to discuss that further. But going back to Seema. Seema, considering what we have seen today, and right after that, in fact, we also saw that iconic image coming through of Donald Trump holding up his fist in a way, putting up a defiant image saying that no matter what, he's, of course, going to carry on with his campaign. But do you see now, in the immediate aftermath, both the Democrat as well as the Republican side actually changing the logistics around these campaigns, because it is an open rally, and how much security can actually be provided in such situations? So what do you envision happening in the next few months now, as we have 4 more months to go till the actual presidential election takes place? What do you see changing in terms of the remaining campaign?
I think security will be further tightened, and the Republicans are getting ready for their convention. Already, there are more, perimeters and more security layers that the press has been reporting. But what I would like to say is that this actually gives, the Republican campaign an iconic image of, Trump doing a fist and, with blood running on down his face. Some people are saying now he's already won the election. As you know, that the Democrats are in a bit of a disarray because there's so many questions about President Biden's age and his ability to complete another term. So that debate is going on in the Democratic Party. It's further going to exacerbate, I think. Pressure on Biden will rise even more. And then there are some who are saying that now the Democratic Party will unite behind Biden because as the focus shifts to Trump, they must get their act together. In all of this, it's also good to remember the January 6th attack, when so many of fairly violent people attacked the US Capitol, they attacked the police, and Trump called them great patriots, quote unquote. So the underpinning of, justifying violence depending on whose side you are on has been going on for nearly the past 3 years, ever since the January 6th attack, I would say. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's in the tradition of other assassination attempts on US presidents, the availability of guns, which people forget in times like this. It's, there are more guns than people in America, frankly, and anybody can go get a machine gun almost. So this is all coming together in a horrific way, but I'm not very optimistic that it's going to spark a real debate on whether there should be severe gun controls.
Right.
But this is the unique part of American democracy, where the biggest question that faces people always gets obscured. That is the availability of guns.
Mm-hmm. And whether or not this is going to come up in the campaign now as an election issue. But Seema, quickly before we let you go, I know you have to go somewhere, but also as you were talking about the insurrection, the January 6th event, considering what we saw of Trump back then and what we saw, the immediate reaction of Donald Trump, we have seen 2 statements come out so far on his social media handles. We are still to see whether or not he'll make a on-camera statement ahead of that Milwaukee event. How do you analyze, the Donald Trump back then to Donald Trump now? Do you think he has taken a few lessons, considering, the kind of media analysis that followed of him, and of course he went on to lose the elections next time around. So do you see a change in strategy in terms of how he has handled this particular event? Of course, as people say, he's an opportunist, and we'll have to wait and see what he says about this once he finally appears in front of the camera again. But in terms of the immediate spot analysis, if I can ask of you, what do you make of it?
No, absolutely. He's a much more disciplined candidate this time around. You saw that during the debate. He was uncharacteristically disciplined, and he wasn't, going off the tangent. His reaction after the assassination attempt has been restrained. He has thanked the Secret Service, etc. And because the surrogates are doing the job he once used to do. So I think he's definitely a more disciplined person, and all the advice that has been given to him, he has taken it to heart, it appears. The only interesting thing I thought I saw, there was a tweet by Lara Trump, where there's an image of Donald Trump with Jesus Christ in the background, and his hand on Donald Trump's shoulder, saying that, don't worry, I'm behind you. So, they are going to use this event to the maximum as any politician would, right? So don't be surprised if the Republican campaign gets energized around this. They already have an iconic image. They have now almost a martyr to the cause. If Trump hadn't turned his head just a little bit, the bullet might have hit him in the face. So all that is going to be seen as like the hand of God, so to say.
Yes, those words have already in fact been said by Vivek Ramaswamy. Seema Sirohi there, thank you so much for joining us. Glenn Carl of course stays on, and we get into the aspect of the incident per se. Glenn, when you were speaking earlier, you were saying that, you know, a few heads might roll because of what we saw taking place. On the one side, of course, the Secret Service agents did manage to save him in a way, moving him out of danger as soon as they sensed it. But the question being, and being a former intelligence officer, would you call this an out-and-out security failure?
Well, it will be called that because the event occurred. Anytime something that is not supposed to happen occurs, then it's characterized and taken to be a failure. So the answer to that is yes. Sometimes, and many times actually, whoever is responsible for a given issue will do nothing wrong, and yet something wrong will happen anyway. But the person is responsible, or the people, or the organization. It is inevitable. We all know the practice in navies that if a ship hits a shoal or something happens wrong, even if the captain had done everything possible, the captain is held responsible. So that will happen no matter what the investigation ultimately finds. There are, as we have talked about already, a couple of reports, eyewitness reports of alarming, what appears to be an alarming oversight. But if that is true, certainly heads will roll. And even if it is not true, I still think that the institution will be held, and the senior officers will be held responsible. I think that's unavoidable, because the alternative is, unjust as that may possibly be, for an institution and individuals to say, well, we'll continue doing our best and there was nothing else we could do. That's not an acceptable response to give after a disaster. So I see the future pretty clearly, I think.
Realistically speaking, Glenn, do you see that the possibility, because there were these reports coming through also that a few people, eyewitnesses, claimed that they had spotted the gunman on the roof and they tried to alert officials a few minutes ahead of the incident actually taking place. Realistically speaking, in such a scenario, do you think that would have even been possible?
What possible? That the reports are accurate, or that
the fact that somebody could actually alert a law enforcement agency of a gunman who was on a rooftop, on a low rooftop close to the stage?
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely possible. I don't have any reason to doubt the honesty and the accuracy of the comments made by the person in the crowd, or at least at the site. But
there could be action taken by the Secret Service agent or the policeman if they are immediately in such a scenario where there are a lot of people standing. There's, of course, a high-profile person there on stage. Does the machinery move quick enough to take heed to a person raising an alarm in such a situation?
Well, it is supposed to, and almost always it will, and does. But perfection is not for anyone here on this world, and there will be oversights. I suspect that the officials, the police officers or whoever it was, to whom the spectators spoke, may have initially been distracted, or would tend to disbelieve someone who seemed overheated, or was confused for a moment, or was seeking to pass this along in the chain of command, might not have been responsible for that particular geographical area. Anyone in all of those could have been involved for a few seconds, and that's all it takes, and then you have someone dead.
Right. Mr. Carl, we will have to take a short break at this point. I'm hearing my producers tell me that. Please stay on. We have a few more issues to discuss on this very, very important topic. Multiple angles that we're looking at of this big story. So stay with us. We'll, of course, come back on the other side of this very short break. Welcome back. You're watching our continuing coverage of the assassination bid on former US President Donald Trump. We are looking at multiple angles of what happened, what went wrong, and of course looking at the impact it has on the US presidential race. Glenn Carl, former Deputy National Intelligence Officer and also former CIA officer, continues to be with us. Glenn, as we were discussing, that there are of course multiple angles involved when such an incident takes place. You know, I was also reading reports about how there is a lot of talk about how the Secret Service is short on manpower and that they have to rely on the local law enforcement agencies a lot whenever they have to cover such a large perimeter. Is that something that you feel is an issue which needs to come to the foreground now? Could that be something that you know, authorities there need to take a look at in the background of this very, very serious situation?
Well, I suppose an institution will say almost reflexively that they need more resources. It needs more resources or more personnel. One can always find more work to fill more hands, but I don't know that the Secret Service needs more resources that way. That's possible. I do not know. I do know that the Secret Service works hand in glove with local authorities in all different levels of government, with the CIA, with the FBI, with local police, wherever they are. There's the Butler police force, which I'm sure is quite small because Butler, Pennsylvania is a small town, but nonetheless, they would be quite important for an event and involved in an event in their own town, and they would work with the Secret Service and vice versa, and on all the levels of government. So that is not an indication at all that there is a problem, rather that there is a coordination among the multiple overlapping relevant instances of the government, federal and local.
Right. Also, Glenn, as an observer, do you think it was the right move for the Secret Service representative not to be part of that FBI press conference today? In a way, FBI was left alone to field all the questions, whereas the people who were actually on ground at that point in time, closely seeing what actually took place, were absent in a way that was like, you know, the elephant in the room in a way, because people would have wanted to hear from the Secret Service chief to actually talk about what their immediate response has been and what measures they're going to take henceforth. Or maybe that is going to be something that they would be addressing very soon. But do you think that in terms of public image management, that was the right move? What is your thought on it?
Well, that's a question for the press offices of whatever institution, probably first. But my first reaction, perhaps as a former insider, is that it wasn't a mistake. The FBI is the law enforcement agency with the lead responsibility for investigations on the territory of the United States, and so that struck me as a routine procedural step. Now, whether that would satisfy a public who wants to hear from the first-hand individuals responsible, that's a reasonable question to ask. I am certain that the Secret Service hierarchy responsible for this will speak at various points. My initial reaction is not to be alarmed, but in something so fraught as an attempted assassination of a former president and presidential candidate, I think we will inevitably hear this kind of dissatisfied reaction at any number of levels as we go forward.
Right, Glenn, and that brings me to an important question, probably the one which we need to take forth from here. Considering what we have seen today, in terms of an intelligence officer, what do you think needs to be the changes which need to be made now around these, you know, the remaining part of the campaign? Because is it possible, considering what we saw today and the fact that there's so much chatter about gun culture and the fact that this is such an important issue but stays in the background, and gun availability is so common in the US. So is it possible to even completely secure open rally events like this, or henceforth, what do you think are some of the immediate changes that you would hope to see at such big ticket campaign events?
I think perfect security is impossible in any circumstance, but in particular, given that, as the previous person being interviewed mentioned, and as we all tragically know, there are literally more guns in America than there are citizens. So that gives America a particular dark honor for those who wish to commit mayhem or violence. But President Kennedy, the day he was assassinated, said to one of his advisors, well, if someone wants to kill me, they will succeed at some. There's nothing ultimately that could stop this or make me untouchable, and that is tragically correct. So it seems to me, and the Secret Service and the FBI will, this is their job, and they will have thought through this problem every hour of every day in a way that I have not, that the alternatives are that you accept some level of risk for the candidate to be in public, or you not allow the person to be exposed to large numbers of people who are impossible completely to control. I think after President Ford, there were 2 assassination attempts against President Ford, which happily failed. And I think that the immediate response was to oblige candidates or the president only to appear literally with a bulletproof shield between him and the public. Possibly we'll see something like that. Beyond that, I know that the measures taken are very rigorous, and I suppose you can expect an increase in the number of checks for people going into the Republican National Convention and measures of that sort. Increase the onion skin layers.
Right, increase the onion layers there, the layers of security around high profile, especially the presidential candidates there in the US. That's something which could possibly be on the cards very soon. Glenn Carl, appreciate you joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you.
Let's take a look now at a report which encapsulates the day's events which have in fact shocked the world. Take a look at this report, which is on the incident which took place at that Trump rally in Pennsylvania.
Gunshots rising out. Former President Donald Trump ducking. Secret Service running to the streets. The 45th President of America narrowly escaped an assassination bid 4 months short of the D-Day. Hit in the ear by the assassin's bullet, Donald Trump rose amid the chaos, pumping his wrist, shouting to the crowd as he is rushed away.
This evening we had what we're calling an assassination attempt against our former president, Donald Trump.
Chaotic scenes at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania after a 20-year-old shot at the Republican president candidate. The shooter, identified as Thomas Matthew Crooks, was camping on a rooftop with an AR-15 rifle when he was shot and killed by Secret Service snipers on the spot. A spectator was also killed in the attack, while 2 others were injured. Eyewitness present at the rally recount horrors of the bloody event. One attendee even saw the shooter run from roof to roof.
We're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle. Absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle.
And then all of a sudden you can hear like ricochets, almost like they were bouncing off of the bleachers, like bullets or whatever it was, hitting bleachers. And then everybody dropped, and Trump dropped also.
Donald Trump whisked away from the Butler rally and was taken away to the hospital, from where he left for his home in the New Jersey. Trump, now safe and at home, shared an update on Truth Social with a message that it is more important now than ever that we stay united. The assassination bid and the grave security lapse have put the Secret Service under scanner. The House Oversight Committee has summoned the director of the Secret Service, saying that the Americans demand answers. The chief will also testify before the House of Republicans on June 22nd. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And there's, of course, a lot of reactions coming in from across the world, as we mentioned, not just Joe Biden, the US president there, but several heads of states have commented and condemned this incident, this assassination bid on Donald Trump. In fact, several leaders have talked about how it is a worrying sign in a democracy. Let's take a look at the top reactions coming in from the world leaders.
Take a look at what happened.
Minutes after former US President Donald Trump was shot, leaders from across the world expressed their shock and concern over the incident. Leaders of India, China and Europe condemned the attack, as several expressed fear about the rise in political violence.
The idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it.
Former US President Barack Obama also condemned the incident, saying there is absolutely no place for political violence in our democracy. British politicians, including newly elected PM Keir Starmer, condemned the assassination and wished Trump well. Reform UK leader and MP Nigel Farage, who has attended several rallies in the United States in support of Trump, said he would have been attending the rally had he not been elected as Member of Parliament from Clacton. Farage has said he will, however, be attending the Republican convention on 15 July to show his support.
Well, I was very upset when I heard the news late last night. I mean, Donald Trump has survived by miracle, frankly, but one innocent man is dead. Two are fighting for their lives in hospital. So it's horrible, and yet somehow not surprising.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky called the assassination attempt as heinous crime. And among the serious challenges global democracies are facing right now.
Замах на життя Дональда Трампа – жахливий злочин, який можна тільки засуджувати і який демонструє, наскільки серйозні виклики глобально зараз перед демократією. Насильство в жодній формі і ніде абсолютно не повинно взяти гору. Я впевнений, Америка гідно пройде цей виклик. Я бажаю якнайшвидшого відновлення пану Трампу, сил, підтримки усім, хто постраждав. Хай кожен злий умисел зазнає невдач. І хай усі, хто може повертати безпеку, дійсно роблять це.
A statement released by a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson revealed that China is following the shooting incident. It said that President Xi Jinping has expressed sympathies to former President Donald Trump. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also strongly condemned the assassination attempt, asserting that violence has no place in politics and democracy. In a statement released on social media platform Truth Social, Donald Trump has urged Americans to stand united. The former president has also said he looks forward to speaking from Wisconsin, where the Republican National Convention will be held on 15 July. With Mohammad Ghazali, Bureau Report, NDTV.
And my colleague Vedant spoke earlier to Steve Herman, Chief National Correspondent of the Voice of America. Listen in.
Steve Harmon, the Chief National Correspondent of Voice of America, joins us live from Whitewater in Virginia. Thanks very much, Steve, for joining us at this hour. My first question to you, how is the US reacting to this absolutely shocking development? World leaders have condemned, this gun violence in the US and Pennsylvania. But what is the reaction there among common folks? Because this is absolutely unprecedented. Though, of course, gun violence is not rare in the US, but a former president and one of the presidential candidates being attacked like this, absolutely shocking.
I think most people are stunned by it. It's a bit surreal. There's a lot of people who have no living memory of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, who was president, or Kennedy's brother Robert F. Kennedy, 1968, who was gunned down as a leading Democratic Party presidential candidate. And then Ronald Reagan survived an assassination attempt shortly after taking office in 1981 in Washington, D.C. So it's been a long time since we've seen anything like this happen. And as you've seen from that video there, Vedant, we were very, very close to seeing Donald Trump, former president of the United States, and the Republican Party presumptive nominee of being seriously wounded or killed. It's absolutely astonishing, and there's a lot of finger pointing going on.
In fact, you put it rather well that it's surreal, and I can imagine, because as you say, not too many people have a living memory of this kind of an assassination attempt. But, ironically, this would, in a sense, reignite the debate around gun violence, around gun laws, which, of course, has been a pretty contentious one as far as the U.S. is concerned. Donald Trump has, of course, promised to undo the restrictions on gun laws if he's re-elected. Recently, we saw Texas gun owners rallying behind Donald Trump as well. So how do you see that debate taking shape?
Well, as you know, Second Amendment rights, the right to own firearms is in the Constitution of the United States. And as you mentioned a few minutes ago, it is really a very big political issue. Republicans traditionally have supported even relaxing further restrictions on guns, while Democrats have been the ones calling for many decades for gun control. It appears that this gunman was using an AR-15 rifle, able to shoot somebody from a considerable distance. There's a lot of automatic weapons that are in people's hands in this country, as we've seen with mass shooters over the decades. Will Donald Trump, after having this very, very close brush with death as a result of a gun owned by someone who was 20 years old, will he take a different tact on this particular issue? I covered Donald Trump in the White House for 4 years, and on the campaign trail before and again after, and I would doubt that it's going to change his mind on this particular issue.
That's right. And as somebody who's covered Donald Trump, as you say, and his campaign, we have seen Trump sort of turning every opportunity and sort of managing to score some sort of political brownie points out of that. Looking at his larger presidential bid as well, how do you see this incident changing that? Because many say that this video, in a sense, could define the 2024 mandate as far as the U.S. is concerned, with the Republican Party now completely united after this incident.
Well, you hit the point there, Vedant. The Republican Party is really united behind Donald Trump even before this incident. This is certainly not going to make him any weaker. That video is going to be repeated over and over again. The still photographs of him pumping his fist with blood on his face. It's a very heroic image, where in contrast, the Democratic Party is almost in an internal civil war of words over whether Joe Biden should continue to be their candidate, and can he serve for another 4 years. So almost no doubt, that in the polls we'll see in the days ahead, and with the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee, where I'm headed today, and where Trump will be formally become the candidate for president of the Republican Party, he would likely get a bit of a bump in the polls from all of this. But it's still a while till November, although Trump, despite the many, many criticisms of him, especially by Democrats and some independent voters, really has not seen anything puncture his sort of Teflon coating of body armor so far. And this incident, of course, is just going to be something that his campaign doesn't even have to spend $1 on to promote him as a very brave man and a hero.
That's right. In fact, his latest statement also in a sense reflects that. He says, I'm defiant in the face of wickedness and that we must all unite after this incident. But, a departure from the politics of it, Steve, what really happened? Break it down for us, because larger questions also being raised on some sort of security lapses, given the fact that the shooter managed to evade Trump's security. Who manages Trump's security? Because, the world is watching this incident very closely. Break it down for us. What is the Secret Service? What could be the likely security lapses?
Yes, the Secret Service has been in charge of protecting presidents for more than a century. As I mentioned, there was the Kennedy assassination, which made security protocols even stricter. I have dealt with them on a near daily basis for many years as someone who goes into the White House and goes on the campaign trail. And Trump, as a former president, automatically would have Secret Service protection for life. And as a leading candidate of a major party, he would have an extra boost in the number of agents assigned to him. Where there appears to be a lapse is the perimeter. This gunman was outside of the venue for the rally, and why that area was not under constant monitoring by sharpshooters who were there at the rally site, or by drones or whatever, that's going to be the subject of a number of investigations. The House Majority Leader Mike Johnson's already calling for such an investigation, wants to call forward the director of the Secret Service. So you're probably apt to see from Republicans a focus on a lapse in security rather than the issue of guns, where Democrats are going to want to talk more about the issue of guns and probably I wouldn't say give the Secret Service the benefit of the doubt, but look at this in a more objective manner, where, I would expect as a result of this particular incident that there's going to be a need for someone to take some responsibility, perhaps resignations ahead. There has been some controversy around the Secret Service in recent years, but I can tell you, as someone who's been with them for many years, they day to day do an excellent job.
That's interesting, but also, the latest such incident that comes to mind was Shinzo Abe's assassination that sent shockwaves across the world. But gun violence is extremely rare in Japan, but that's not the case in the US. I mean, we've seen multiple such assassination attempts in the past as well. Try and sort of recall for us how that changed the political career of those who managed to survive those assassination attempts, those former presidents who were able to escape. And in this case also, the timing becomes extremely critical, as you say yourself, just ahead of that announcement of Trump as the official candidate.
Well, Gerald Ford, who succeeded Richard Nixon and then pardoned Nixon in the Watergate scandal, survived 2 assassination attempts. It did not do very much for him politically because he lost his election. Ronald Reagan was shot and survived, and it was a very serious incident. He almost died as a result of that shooting outside the Washington Hilton in 1981, and he was re-elected for a second term in 1984 in a landslide victory, but that was several years after the incident had happened. In this particular case, it's a lot closer to the election, in a very, very close election. And Donald Trump certainly is going to, and his campaign team is going to play this up. And he will go to Milwaukee this week as some sort of hero arriving at the Republican National Convention.
Now, with this incident, the ghost of presidential assassinations has returned to the U.S. in a chilling reminder of what political violence in the U.S. looked like. Remember, this incident of a top politician in the U.S. being attacked, or an assassination bid on them, has happened after 43 years. There's been 7 failed assassination attempts in the U.S. on U.S. presidents, including Donald Trump.
Shot by John Wilkes Booth, Abraham Lincoln was the first U.S. president to be assassinated. Near the end of the American Civil War, Lincoln's assassination is believed to be a part of the larger political conspiracy intended by Booth to revive the Confederate cause. Less than 4 months into his presidency, James Andrew Garfield was assassinated by Charles J. Getty. Getty had expected a reward in return for what he considered valuable contributions to the latter's campaign, which went unrealized. Getty's dissatisfaction over the same allegedly led to him shooting President Andrew Garfield. The 25th President of the United States, William McKinley, was also the third US President to be assassinated in 1901. McKinley was shot twice in the abdomen by Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist who had lost his job in the Great Panic of 1893. Believing McKinley to be a symbol of oppression, Czolgosz became convinced that it was his duty as an anarchist to kill him. It was upon McKinley's assassination that the Secret Service was charged with the responsibility of protecting the president by Congress in 1901. Giuseppe Zangara, in an attempt to kill President Franklin Delano Roosevelt during a rally, ended up killing the then mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, and injuring 5 others. Arguably the most shocking and recent assassination was that of US President John Kennedy in Dallas in 1963. While Lee Harvey Oswald was held responsible for Kennedy's killing, conspiracy theories surrounding Kennedy's death ranged a dozen, and the event has remained fresh in popular media around the world. On March 30, 1981, President of the United States Ronald Reagan was shot and wounded by John Hinckley Jr. in Washington, D.C. as he was returning to his limousine after a speaking engagement. While President Reagan survived the attempt on his life after a brief stint in the hospital, Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy, a D.C. police officer, and White House Press Secretary James Brady were also wounded. All 3 survived, but Brady had brain damage and was permanently disabled. Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity on charges of attempting to assassinate the president.